Okay. Good afternoon. Thursday, week 2. Welcome, welcome. Take your seats. Get your stuff together, and let's start. All the issues are discussed. All the items of that today, the agenda points, everything clear? Okay. In my hand is the law collection that is allowed during the exam, containing the sources of law. And today, gentlemen, today we will look at quite a few of them. The three substantive topics on poverty, on the sources, and we return to the United Nations recipe, the systematic approach to the goals of financial development. And I coined that the recipe. The idea is that in your thinking, you keep the recipe in the back of your mind for two reasons. To know where you are in the types of interventions pertaining to development, and secondly, whether the thing you have to do in better work life is appropriate, or whether another part of the recipe should be mobilized first, executed first. There's a order in the recipe, and the ingredients should be done in the correct order, is the idea of the United Nations. So today we zoom in on the decision-making process. How is the source of law, be it soft law, decided upon, who did so, who is in charge? Gentlemen in the back. The story of this course is sort of summarized in this picture, and I uploaded this picture also as a separate JPEG on Blackboard in the exam prep tab, where you recognize the flow of money in an economy, which is sort of the anatomy of the development of a society, of a state, with the internal, local flow of goods and services, labor, capital, innovation, governmental services, and the aspect of the export, import, export. And then we stated that ideal picture of a complete economy is not strong enough to boost a development in the comparison to other economies. The story of Brazil taking 146 years to get at the same development status as the United States. And we concluded last week that three types of interventions are then taking place. I'm not sure whether I say required. There's a sort of normative statement that could be disputed, but we can, from an empirical point of view, from a practical, realistic point of view, conclude that those interventions exist and that the professionals are involved with them. And those three arrows on the picture symbolize those three interventions, those three sort of kickstart attempts of a local economy with the aim of develop that society. And then you have the arrow of official development assistance, ODA, that is state triggered. Then you have the foreign direct investment, FDI, which is company triggered. And then you have remittance, which is then private individual triggered. There are also capital letters. And basically each letter is an area of law. And most of those areas of law, you know, they're listed in the text and material. So, for instance, H, the letter H is labor law or civil services law. F is contract law, consumer protection. And we will meet those letters in the course of the weeks. As a study tip, I suggest you use this drawing, this picture, as a sort of starting point and as a checklist. And if you have a narrative and a story on each aspect and each letter, then you're done and ready for the exam. So all the stories I tell and Ms. are part of this picture. So we are discussing this picture. Well, we tried to say sensible things about development, and we used the word poverty. And the word poverty is, let's say, the word that is used for the longest time. It's the 18th century, maybe the 17th century, where those who are well-to-do, traders, governments, after reaching the state that they're well-to-do and they're able to build palaces and the Amsterdam Canal area and so forth, and the mansions in the UK and the little castles in the France and so forth. People look around and observe that others are not well-to-do. And then there are these sort of emotional feelings and all kinds of other processes that make the well-to-do think of, why are the others poor? And then over the centuries there were always people, and sometimes it were faith-based organizations like religions that took that role to do something about it. And always the word poor or poor was sort of triggered. Well, you're poor, let me help you. And so that is sort of maybe even in our genes. And certain faith-based organizations make it a sort of a mission statement to help the poor. And the development topic of this course is no exception, with the aim to see what scholars are able to say about it. And we introduced already in the first introductory week 3 terms. Those are the gross domestic product, GDP, which is an economical concept. We met the purchase power parity, and we met the Big Mac index. And the only thing I want to do right now is to confirm that these are critical concepts, so I invite you to do a little study on them where needed. And the goal of all 3 concepts are to measure poverty, or in other words, to measure wealth in a attempt to compare that wealth with other states, to ultimately find, let's say, objective reasons to help or assist or invest in one country and not in another country. So based on the outcome of these numbers, we all feel that the international community has no task to help the Princedom Liechtenstein in their development. Or that the international community in this stage should be putting the development of the Netherlands very high on the agenda and making a efforts to help. And that is based on the comparison of these types of figures. And the problem with those concepts is that no one knows whether they are accurate. So when you look at gross domestic product, that is basically the addition of all the financial transactions in one economy in 1 year. You add it up. And you say, well, the sort of balance sheet or the sort of wealth or the sort of economic value of this country is X. And then reasons why you're uncertain is that to compare all the 192 sovereign states with each other, you have to choose a comparison stick, and that is the United States dollar. And in the workshop lecture, we dwelled a little bit on the dollar and on central banks and on the phenomena that money is also something you can just get out of a printer and then you have more money. And so how is the US dollar as a measure stick working out in the comparison of all the countries that translate their gross domestic product to a dollar amount so that you can compare it with other countries? In a context where part of those economies hate the dollar because in their political, cultural atmosphere they think that that's an evil country and vice versa. And nevertheless, then the dollar is taken as sort of the measure. So there's a big question mark, and economists, since the invention of the GDP, bigger with each other, which for legal professionals is beautiful to see, because we used to bigger with each other also about the substance, and other disciplines do that too. And then we can lean back and relax and say, we wait with final conclusions until you're done with your find what the value of GDP exactly is. But we are realistic, because there are not that many other tools to compare. And so in all these statistics, in all the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and decision-making organs, sort of 80% of the decision is based on GDP, by a lack of an alternative. And we hope, fingers crossed, that it is somehow accurate or not completely deserved answer. The same applies to purchase power parity. That is a more precise translation or calculation to take into account that the costs of living and housing and food and health and services differ from country to country. So one aspect is always the income. So if you have an income of 10,000 US dollars equivalent per year, that is not yet a decisive answer to the question, are you poor or rich? So if in that same economy the rent of an apartment is $1,200 a month, then you're extremely poor, because then you cannot even afford a house, let alone food and so forth. But if the house in that same economy is, let's say, $50 a month, then you're pretty rich. And we all know that prices of apartments differ, even in a city like The Hague. And the prices in the city center are higher than in the Laaghaven, and if you allow yourself to travel even further, then the prices drop. So we all know that a hut on the Sahara is having a different price tag than a Lamapan mansion. So that is then the purchase power parity, that you actually compare not the gross domestic product, so all the dollars in the country, but the position of an individual pertaining to how much can that person afford and purchase with the income they get. So for that you need two things. You need an average of the income of that society, well, that you can get from the Bureau of Statistics, who gets it from the tax authority, because everybody is supposed to pay income tax one way or the other, even in countries that are in other states of development. income tax is paid. And then you have to make sort of a catalog of all kinds of prices and take the average. So you count all the average rents and you count the average price of 1 kilo of meat and so forth. You make a sort of average, a basket of an average person, and you can compare that with the same exercise in other countries. So PPP, purchase power parity. And if you look at that, there are these beautiful maps, global maps, and maybe I show you. And then the Big Mac index is basically the same. That is an initiative of The Economist, the journal that you're reading on a weekly basis, since Mr. Peter van Krieken, immigration law, insisted you to do so, or someone else. And they also ask themselves the question, well, how can we determine, or how can we compare those states we, as journalists, report on? And then they thought, okay, let's take the Big Mac, because that is available in 180 of the 192 countries. And then we compare the local prices of the Big Mac with each other and see how much Big Mac can you afford with your income. It's sort of equivalent of purchase power parity. And then you can rank the states accordingly. So the McDonald's hamburger? Yeah. So in 180 countries out of 192, there is McDonald's. And the idea of the franchise chain of McDonald's is that all the hamburgers look the same. And smell the same and taste the same. That's what they promise in their advertisement. And then they have a price that you can't compare. Yes?
You said that PPP has two aspects, the average income and the second is
The cost of living. And so the basket of all the things you need to purchase as a human being, food and medical health care and housing and transportation, gasoline, all kinds of classic ingredients of life. And in that way, you can accommodate the fact that for instance, in Saudi Arabia, gasoline is pretty cheap because it gets out of the soil if you do not watch out, and then you only turn it into gasoline for your car, and other, let's say, advantages countries could have. Maybe you have very fertile territories where the food is sort of dropping from the trees, and you can eat from that without sort of cost, and then you can compare, let's say, your position with the position of someone else. Yes, question? No? No other questions? No? Okay, and then there are a lot of people writing on poverty, and I took one, Mr. Dayton, an article from 2004, and I suggest that we do this slide. Those are sort of keywords. That we do this slide in the workshop lecture, allowing you to actually read Mr. Dayton and use this slide as sort of reading tool, and in the idea that we should encourage learning activity on your side also. So this is sort of cliffhanger. So if you promise me to read Dayton, on which I will ask a few exam questions, then I promise you the workshop lecture to go for this. And the one I like is the Mikhail problem. So to add to the cliffhanger quality of my statements, so what the heck is a Mikhail problem? To give away a little bit of the cliffhanger, and that's a sort of spoiler. So let's assume that at the end of the road we define what poverty is. $1.26 income per year, per day. And the Mikhail problem is, what happens then to the people earning $1.26 per day? Are they not poor anymore? Are they not entitled to official development assistance and special arrangement? Intriguing question. Okay. On the other one, rather scientific and cold, that you compare the calorie. So if you have 2,000 calories per day, then you cannot be poor because you will survive. If you not use monetary things but calories or joule according to the United Nations. Okay. The other spoiler is that ultimately, and if you need that, please look at some pictures, but there is poverty out there. And there is a discrepancy between all the goodies that are promised by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the reality in the different states. So let's move to those promises and to the sources of law. And let's jump to the Monterey agenda. And let me explain how that technically works. So, United Nations, so this is sort of law of international organization. Okay? So the General Assembly of the United Nations, which is the representation of all the member states, sort of the democratic organ, sort of legislative branch of the United Nations. And they have instruments, and they are called, among others, resolutions. That is basically their sort of equivalent of directives and regulations when you compare to the European Union. So there are no EU laws, so the resolution is the highest you can get in New York. And they are numbered. They are numbered according to the year of the existence of the United Nations / the number of that year. And in the third year of existence, in 1948, they adopted Resolution 217. And the nickname of Resolution 217 of year number 3, 1948, is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Basically, the legislative branch of the United Nations adopting a set of up to 40 clauses that basically stipulate what humans are entitled to. So there is a democratic wish of the United Nations, and all the new member states since 1948 adopted and accepted this same resolution. UN lawyers are never using this word, but you could call it a UN acquis in European Union law, and there's this sort of EU law acquis. And if you want to be a new member state, you have to adopt the acquis of the European Union legislation. And we symbolize that on open days of this program with there, in the meantime, 100,000 pages out there of EU legislation, and together that's the acquis. And if you want to play along, then you have to put your signature on all 100,000 pages. Same applies with the United Nations, especially when it comes to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the relevance for this course is that it says that a human being is entitled to all the things you can imagine